All right, so today we'll be talking over federal rules for cost using federal funds, federal regulations, and the state of Iowa rules referred to purchasing as procurement. Additional information on costs for labor, equipment, materials is provided in the PowerPoint. I'll be sharing this after the presentation as well for everybody that is attending. And if you have any questions, feel free to just jump in as I'm going through or save them till the end, whatever you prefer. Everybody's been given talk access, so anybody can jump in with questions as we go through this. All right. My name is Ashley Middleton. I'm our field delivery lead here in public assistance with the state of Iowa. And I'll share my contact information at the end again, but if you have any questions as you're working through your project, feel free to reach out to me or your project specialist. So under public assistance, they have the eligibility pyramid. Not all costs incurred as a result of the incident are eligible. Cost is the funding tied directly to eligible work and must be adequately documented, authorized, necessary, and reasonable. The cost must comply with the uniform guidance and the cost principles located in 2 CFR 200. Eligible costs include labor, equipment, materials, contract work, as well as direct and indirect administrative cost. You should be prepared to provide documentation to support the costs, including invoices, receipts, proof of payment, documentation of procurement, timesheets, payroll reports, and any applicable policies. Additional guidance on cost eligibility can be found in the POPAG. Federal procurement requirements can be found at 2 CFR 200 subpart D, and you can use the link provided in the presentation. Failure to follow federal procurement and contracting requirements can jeopardize FEMA funding. State versus non-state entities and applicants have different requirements for procuring with federal funds. This presentation doesn't cover all federal procurement and contracting requirements. So we do encourage you to look more into it. If you have additional questions, you can also reach out to us and we can help support you through that. 2 CFR was implemented in December 26, 2014. A grace period allowing entities to update their policies and systems for complying ended December 25th, 2017. There may be jurisdictions with no written procurement purchasing policies. Absent a separate policy, a city may have procurement rules, guidance is noted in Code of Ordinances. An applicant/subrecipient cannot state that they follow state procurement rules as their guidance for purchasing with federal funds. State entities, applicants have different requirements under the federal rules. Prior federal regulations allowed this. This change became effective in 2014. CFR states that applicants must have and use documented procurement procedures consistent with state, local, and tribal laws and regulations. State government applicants must follow the same policies and procedures they would use for procurements with non-federal funds that comply with 2 CFR 200.322. Non-state applicants, tribal and local governments, and PMPs must use their own written procurement procedures that reflect applicable state, tribal, and local government laws and regulations, provided that the procurement conform to applicable federal law and standards. Common issues leading to disallowed cost: failure to document and justify reasonability. Appendix 2 lists required contract provisions. It is not adequate to simply copy and paste Appendix 2 into a purchasing agreement/contract. FEMA has a template for Appendix 2 contract provisions. If an applicant does have a written conflict of interest policy, a sample policy for another jurisdiction that has been reviewed and approved by HSCMD's disaster grants and admin policy reviewers can be provided. Applicants may have a standalone conflict of interest policy or incorporate into their procurement purchasing policy. The policy should reflect both state and federal requirements. Sometimes conflict of interest policies are addressed in employee manuals and are listed as code of conduct policy. Applicant policies should address compliance for all levels, local, state, and federal. Federal regulations require applicants to have written procedures, policies for purchasing, procurement. In addition to written procurement and purchasing policies applicable to contracts, materials purchased, applicants must also have policies detailing payments of applicants, employees, union contractors, personnel policies found in an employee or union handbook. Force account labor refers to an applicant's own employees, and force account equipment refers to an applicant's own equipment. Both of those must have policies for how those are tracked. Emergency and exigent procurement situations have fewer restrictions. However, the situation must meet the emergency and exigency definition. Methods of procurement. 2 CFR small purchase is defined using the simplified acquisition threshold. The SAT was increased to $250,000 in fiscal year 2018 and is periodically updated. Commonly, the number of adequate bids or quotes is seen as 3 or more. Documenting efforts can be copies of emails, copies of notice for bids, etc. What if you only get one response? If at first you don't succeed, you can try again and document your efforts. There are 2 methods for procurement: formal sealed bids. Sealed bids are a preferred method for contracting when requirements solicited are known and specific in detail, so the procurement lends itself to a fixed price contract type. Solicitation, known as invitation request for bids, must describe specifications for the requirements and include instructions for interested offers. All proposals must be opened at a time and place described, and the IFB, RFB proposals must be advertised and opened publicly. Proposals must be solicited from an adequate number of qualified suppliers and provide them sufficient response time. If you only get one response, the cleanest way, especially for non-emergency, temporary or permanent work, is bid the work again. Documenting efforts can be copies of emails, copies of responses, etc. Non-competitive procurement, sole sourcing. When is a non-competitive procurement allowed? The item is available only for a single source. The public exigency or emergency for the requirement will not permit a delay resulting from publicizing a competitive solicitation. The federal award agency or pass-through entity expressly authorizes a non-competitive procurement in response to a written request from a non-federal entity. This almost never happens. After solicitation of a number of sources, competition is determined inadequate. If you send out a solicitation and only get one response, try again. The applicant's adopted procurement policy must allow sole sourcing. Emergency and exigency procurement. Emergency is defined as the existence of a threat to life, public health, or safety, or improved property requiring immediate action to alleviate the threat. Exigency is defined as the existence of a need to avoid, prevent, or alleviate serious harm or injury, financial or otherwise, to the applicant. A few examples. In an emergency situation, there's severe weather impacts to a city. It causes loss of life, widespread flooding, loss of power, debris across the city. The city then needs to bring in debris removal activities immediately to restore access to the community. And as a result of the health and safety concerns, this is considered emergency procurement to have somebody remove the debris. In an exigency situation, or tornado hits a community in June, causing damage to a school. School is set to begin in September. Awarding a contract using a sealed bidding process would require at least 90 days and then an additional 60 to complete the work. Rather than conducting a sealed bidding process, the city can use exigency circumstance to make sure school can start on time and use sole source with a contractor. Contracting with small and minority businesses, women business enterprises, and labor surplus area firms. Uniform rules also aim to promote participation amongst diverse businesses to use federal funds more equitably. These steps are crucial and cannot be done after the fact. Failure to take these steps has resulted in recommendation for disallowance of through OIG audits of other states. The FEMA PDAT website has a fact sheet to assist with compliance, and there are 6 steps listed on the next slide. The 6 steps include placing qualified small and minority businesses and women business enterprises on solicitation lists, assuring that small and minority businesses and women business enterprises are solicited whenever they are potential sources, dividing total requirements when economically feasible into smaller tasks or quantities to permit maximum participation by small and minority businesses and women business enterprises, establishing delivery schedules where the requirements permits, which encourage participation by small and minority businesses, using the service and assistance as appropriate of such organizations as the Small Business Administration SBA search tool and the Minority Business Development Agency of the Department of Commerce, and requiring the prime contractor, if some contracts are to be let, to take the affirmative steps included in 1 through 5 above. So in summary, tribal and local governments, PMPs must comply with the following federal standards: provide full and open competition, conduct all necessary affirmative steps to ensure the use of minority businesses, women businesses, and labor surplus area firms when possible. So target small businesses. Contractors that develop or draft specifications, requirements, statement of work, or invitations for bids or requests for proposals may not compete for such procurements to ensure objective contractor performance and eliminate unfair competitive advantage. Maintain written standard of conduct covering conflicts of interest and governing the performance of employees who engage in the section, award, and administration of contracts. Maintain records sufficient to detail the history of the procurement. Again, the micro purchase may be awarded without soliciting competitive quotations if price is considered reasonable under $10,000. The small purchase is informal, several price quotes, minimum of 3 for anything under $250,000. Sealed bid is formal advertising. Competitive proposals is based on qualification. Non-competitive procurement is limited primarily to emergency work. 1 or more of the following must apply. This is only available from a single source. The public exigency or emergency for the requirement will not permit delay resulting from competitive solicitation. FEMA or recipient expressly authorized in response to written requests from the applicant, and after solicitation of a number of sources, competition is determined inadequate. Acceptable contract types include lump sum, unit price, cost plus fixed price, time and material. If no other contract is suitable, limited time must have a ceiling price. Applicants to provide high degree of contractor oversight if this is needed. FEMA does not reimburse costs incurred under a cost plus percentage contract. Federal contract provisions are required within the body of the contract as an attachment to the contract. A few procurement contracting grant mistakes that we commonly see. So restricting full and open competition, not performing detailed price or cost analysis procurement if it's above $250,000, engaging in a sole sourcing procurement without documentation of emergency or exigent situation, continuing to work under a sole source contract after the urgent need has ended, not making documentation efforts to take all affirmative steps, awarding in time and material contracts without a ceiling price and documenting why no other contract type is suitable, not including the required contract clauses, awarding a cost-free percentage of cost or a percentage of construction cost contract, awarding a contract to contractors that are suspended or debarred, not documenting all steps of procurement to answer questions that could arise months or years later. 2 CFR implemented updates for procurement for Iowa. These updates are applicable to disaster 4732 and on. In addition to implementing a new statutory prohibition regarding covered telecommunication equipment and services, OMB also revised the federal procurement under grant standards to provide greater flexibility regarding the micro purchase threshold, incorporate the increased micro purchase and simplified acquisition thresholds, and add a domestic premises provision. Now, force account labor is any of your own employees. Each employee claimed must include the name, job title, and function, type of employee, whether part-time, full-time, exempt, or temporary, the days and hours worked, the pay rate and fringe benefit rates, and benefit calculations. For emergency work, only overtime labor costs are eligible for emergency work categories. Alternative procedures does allow for a Cat A, regular, and overtime to be claimed. For permanent work categories C through G, regular time and overtime labor costs are eligible for permanent work categories. Overtime costs are only eligible if it's an established policy to pay overtime, and fringe benefit is eligible for both. Time and effort reporting. This needs to be completed for each employee. It must account for 100% of all the hours worked during the period of time being claimed. It must delineate each activity, project, and all non-federal activity normal job. Must coincide with the employee's payroll period, pre-disaster payroll and accounting policies, and payroll documentation. So if you have a forced account labor employee that worked 5 hours of their day on their project, and they normally work an 8-hour day, you would show how many hours they worked, all 8 hours that they worked. You'd also be showing the 5 hours they worked on what specific project. That way we can compare that to their pay documentation. Force account equipment. Eligible during the operator's regular and overtime. Standby time is ineligible. You must use FEMA cost codes and your own cost codes. FEMA's cost codes do include fuel, insurance, depreciation, and normal maintenance. It does not include labor to operate. Purchasing equipment and supplies in order to respond to the disaster is eligible if necessary and reasonable. Renting equipment is also eligible. Make sure that each piece of equipment and attachment used, including year, make, model, size, capacity, horsepower, wattage, and operator, are listed. The operator's timesheet is needed to show that the operator was working during the time being claimed for the piece of equipment. Identify operator even if the operator's time is not being claimed, such as Cat B emergency work, or if the operator is an exempt employee. There are times as well when you might have an operator using 2 pieces of equipment if they're attached, sometimes for debris cleanup. And FEMA actually just came out with a new cost code in July. So if you don't have that, let us know and we can share that with you. Cost of materials purchased or from stock and used during the performance of eligible work is eligible. Invoices, purchase orders, proof of payment, canceled checks or accounting records, and inventory records of materials taken from stock must be kept for these costs to be claimed. A copy of the MOA or MOU should be provided. It should be noted that mutual aid work is subject to the same eligibility criteria as contract work. Costs of transport, providing entities equipment and personnel to the declared area are eligible. Providing entities straight time and overtime labor are eligible, including fringe benefits. When the requesting entity is an SLTT government and the providing entity is another division within the same SLTT government, straight time for budgeted employees of the providing entity is ineligible. FEMA is legally prohibited from duplicating benefits from other sources. If an applicant receives funding from another source for the same work, FEMA reduces the eligible costs to prevent a duplication of benefits. Most commonly, we see this through insurance proceeds. Record keeping is crucial. Records can be kept electronic or hard copy. The subrecipients must maintain all source documentation for each project for 3 years after the date of transmission of the final expenditure report for project completion as certified by the recipient. Additionally, SLTT government laws may require longer retention periods. Records are a good way for the applicant to show repetitive damage of facility via multiple events. A pre-award risk assessment must have been completed within the last 12 months. If not, a new pre-award risk assessment is required. A pre-award risk assessment is also required even if the self-certification risk assessment has been done in the past 12 months. For example, the risk assessment for the Emergency Management Performance Grant, EMPG. If applicants need more than 30 days to update a policy, an extension will be given. An example of this might be if the City Council only meets monthly and will need time to review. Cities can adopt and update, amend policies by resolutions. It does not have to go through readings for Code of Ordinances. School districts do 1 or 2 readings before adopting. It's important to note that the pre-award risk assessment is part of the funding agreement approval process. The pre-award risk assessment is step 3 in the 5-step funding agreement approval process. The funding agreement cannot be approved until the pre-award risk assessment is completed. Until the funding agreement is complete, the applicant, you cannot receive FEMA funds for the disaster, regardless of whether projects for the applicant have been obligated or even closed. Here's a list of FEMA's PDAP website to show some additional resources and trainings to support you through the procurement and contracting process. And that is it. Do we have any questions? All right, that is all I have. Thank you so much for joining. I will be uploading this recording, and the PowerPoint will be emailed out to you and also placed on our website. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.